Thanks for coming out here on a spring evening. Spring's finally springing. The next time you come here, there'll be 110,000 tulips out there. So we're excited about that. And we're especially excited to be here celebrating wildlife conservation. I think you know the Cincinnati Zoo's been involved with African cat conservation for a long, long time. Since Catherine Hilker started our cheetah program in 1980. And then she and the zoo purchased the big farm for the Cheetah Conservation Fund in Namibia back in 1990. We've been very involved with lion conservation and the Maasai community for the past 20 years. But we're going to hear a great story from Dr. Moreangels Mbizah, who's from Zimbabwe. And she's a fascinating person because she's very young, but she has a PhD from Oxford. She studied with Dr. Amy Dickman, who some of you have heard here, who's as incredible as anybody, and runs a big organization, Wildlife Conservation Action in Zimbabwe. She has 42 employees. So they're doing a lot, but the heartening part, I think, is that you'll hear not just about wildlife, but the coexistence. Because it's one thing when we were here and living in a city to say, okay, well, we've got coyotes. But a lot of places her team works, there are folks living out there with the animals. And we'll learn about how they find a way to make room for both people and animals. Please welcome Moreangels Mbizah.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Yeah, so I just arrived 2 days ago. And these past 2 days, I've been walking around in the zoo and I've seen lots of kids and their faces are just bright and happy. And yeah, that really touched me. And even back home, it always touches my heart. And like, I feel really emotional seeing the kids like in the wild or interacting with wildlife. Because often I get asked the question, I think even yesterday, somebody asked me like, how did you get into conservation? And I always wish my story was that I was that kid who I saw yesterday, but it wasn't like that. So I'm this kid here. And I grew up in a small town in Zimbabwe called Chiredzi, which is in the southeast Lowveld. Chiredzi is about 100 kilometers. So from here to Gonarejo National Park, which is the second largest national park in Zimbabwe. But as a young kid growing up in this little town, I did not know anything about wildlife. I'd never visited wildlife. I'd never had a chance to go to Gonarejo to see wildlife as a young girl. And so conservation was something that I didn't even know about. And then when I eventually managed to study and go to university, I then did my first degree in environmental science. I didn't really have a solid plan about what I wanted to do with my life. I was just talking this afternoon that I didn't really have any sort of like direction that I wanted to take. So I was just trying to find my path through all that. But then I ended up doing a master's program called Tropical Resource Ecology. And during that program, that's when I started to learn about wildlife. So I started to learn about elephants, hippos, and I was trying to imagine in my mind, like I had seen on TV, like just a bit about the wildlife, but I had not seen any elephant like in real life. I had not seen any wildlife at that point, and I was like 24 years old. So when I was studying this master's program, we started learning about wildlife ecology, and that sparked an interest in me. So I was like really curious to know more. And so I wanted to do a project on wildlife. And so I looked around the country to see where I could find a project that I could join. So I ended up going to Save Valley Conservancy, which was also like close to my hometown. So Save Valley is around this area. So it's a private conservancy. So I went there, and that was my first time being in a wildlife area. And just being in that natural environment and seeing the kudus jumping around, the impalas, like I just felt a strong connection. And I really felt that that was my purpose. I felt like I had found my purpose in life. And that's how my conservation career started. So that was me back then. And I was studying African wild dogs. So that's why I was so today I went to see some wild dogs, and yeah, I was so emotional because they were my first love. So that was my introduction to conservation. So thank you. So this was 2018. I managed to graduate with a DPhil in zoology from the University of Oxford. So I was studying lions for my PhD, and I really love big cats. And so my research was around trying to understand the ecology, the behavior of lions in an area where the water distribution, the herbivore distribution was heterogeneous. So I was like a scientist. And after I finished my PhD, I came back home to Zimbabwe, and I wanted to make a difference. But I felt that I wasn't going to make any difference if I keep doing the same thing that has been continuously done in conservation. So I thought I needed to find a different way of doing conservation. I had seen at that point, I had been in the conservation sector for like 10 years, and I'd seen that things were not moving. Something was missing. So that's when I formed my organization in 2019 called Wildlife Conservation Action. So this was the organization at that time. so just the three of us, we came together. So some of our initial work was just around trying to understand distribution of wildlife, trying to understand the dynamics of human-wildlife conflict across Zimbabwe. And then from there, we started to grow. This was 2023, 2024. And now we are 42 people. So, yeah, so it started with a dream that I had to change the way conservation was being done, and which was that communities had to lead conservation efforts. I believe that the people who are most affected by the problem should be the ones to look for solutions for those problems because they understand the problem better. We can help them look for the solutions, but they have to lead and take action in solving those problems. So that's why I founded this organization. So our work in Zimbabwe, so we are mainly working in Zimbabwe, and we are working in the Zambezi Valley. I don't know, some of you might have heard about the Zambezi River. So yeah, so this is the Zambezi River, which is bordering Zimbabwe and Zambia. And then there's Mozambique here as well. And then we have Lake Kariba. So this is the lake. So we are working in this area, which is called Mbire, Hurungwe, Nyami Nyami, and Binga. So all these areas are around wildlife areas. So all the green are the wildlife areas. And we work with communities who are living around these wildlife areas. So So we didn't want to just go into a small area and work and try to have impact at that small area or level. We wanted to take a landscape approach to our work. So that's why when we started looking at where we could start, we looked for a place where we could have impact at a landscape level. So that's why we chose this area. So it's across 3 transfrontier conservation areas. So we have the Lower Zambezi, Manapu's transfrontier conservation area. Then we have the Zimoza, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Zambia. And then we have the Kaza, which is the Kavango Zambezi transfrontier conservation area. So it's an area that is important for biological diversity and important for elephants and for lions and other species that require large tracts of land for their conservation. So this is where we are currently working in. And when we started looking at how we were going to approach our conservation work, and mainly our human-wildlife coexistence work, because that's what our main focus is around, like finding ways for people and wildlife to live together in shared landscapes. Because as you have seen, where people are, wildlife is also present. So there's that sharing of the same landscape. There's no separation, there are no fences between wildlife areas and communal areas. So there's always that interaction between people and wildlife. So when we were looking at our strategy of how we were going to achieve this vision that we had of coexistence, we started thinking about a holistic approach. Like, we didn't want to just come in and solve a small part of the problem. We wanted to come in and solve a greater part of the problem and have impact at a higher level. So with these communities, they are living with wildlife. These areas are also marginal areas. They are experiencing climate change, and they also have poor livelihoods. They are some of the poorest in society in Zimbabwe. So we had to look at all those things and put them in perspective and see how we could approach the problem rather than just looking at one problem. So our strategic goals, the first one is human-wildlife conflict mitigation, where we are looking at how we can reduce the cost of living with wildlife. And then we have climate smart livelihoods, where we are looking at income generation projects that are climate resilient and that are also good for the environment. And then we have research and conservation leadership, where we do all our research or collect all the data that we need and also build the next generation of conservation leaders. And then we also have environmental education and awareness, where we work with kids in schools and also with the communities to raise awareness around conservation issues. So looking at our first goal, which is human-wildlife conflict mitigation, we are trying to reduce the cost to livelihoods incurred by local communities who are living around wildlife areas. So as I said, that the communities are sharing their same space with wildlife. So often, because these communities rely on agriculture, on crop farming for their livelihoods, they rely on cattle or livestock production for their livelihoods. And because they are living with wildlife, lions come in and kill their livestock. Elephants come in and destroy their crops. So they are losing their livelihoods. And when this happens, and understandably, the communities are going to be angry. They are going to want to revenge. They would want to kill the lions or the elephants. And so when we have this conflict happening, we have losses on both sides. The communities lose their livelihoods, and the lions, the elephant, the wildlife ends up losing their lives because they get killed in retaliation. So our objective with this goal is to reduce these costs that are being incurred on both sides, the people and the wildlife. So one of the models that we use, as I said initially, that we wanted communities to lead the conservation efforts. We are very strong around community-led conservation. We don't want it to be just something that we talk about. We want to walk it. And so our model and the backbone of our work is around our community guardians. So these are young men and women from the communities we work with. So we recruit them, we train them. They are recommended by their leaders in the communities they come from. And then they are the ones that will start to lead the efforts around human-wildlife conflict mitigation. So when we started, these community guardians, they would use bicycles to do their work. So they work like 9 to 5, like every day. And when there's an emergency, they are there to help the communities. They respond to every conflict incident. They go there, they collect the data, and they help the farmer and give the farmer the advice around what they can do better to protect their livestock or their crops. So they are always there to respond. And the community appreciates that, because they now know there's somebody who cares about them. Because previously they always thought that the Wildlife Authority, the conservation people, they just care about the wildlife and not them. So having people who are there to respond, who are from those communities and who are experiencing the same problem has been such a huge impact on our work and the behavior of the communities, their attitudes towards conservation have shifted because of the presence of these community guardians. So initially they were using bicycles, and this was really difficult because they had to cover long distances, but then we managed to get some funding, and now they are using motorcycles, and they are now covering larger distances, and they are being more effective in their work. We also use technology. So we are using GPS collars on lions and elephants, and these act as early warning system. So the collars have they have geofencing. So we see the boundary of the protected area and use that as a geofence. So when they come close to the boundary and before they get into the communities, we send an alert to the community so that they are aware that an elephant is coming or a lion is coming, and then they take action to protect their livestock, their crops, and they also are there to push back the animal into the protected area. So our team also tracks these collars to find where the animals are. So it's also one of the ways that we try to prevent the conflict from happening rather than dealing with the conflict after it has happened. And then we also use mobile bombers. So these are predator-proof. They are made of, sometimes you can use PVC material, which is used for making tents, or canvas material. So this is the bomber here. And with this bomber, you put your livestock inside, and then it will deposit, the livestock will deposit some dung, and then maybe after 2 weeks, you move the bomber, so it's mobile, so you move it from one place to another. And we encourage the farmers to put them inside their crop fields. So when they do that, you can see here that this is an area where there was no bomber, and this is an area where there was a bomber. So now the cattle dung is fertilizing the soil, improves soil fertility, improves crop growth and yields. So it's a dual purpose method, mitigating conflict, protecting livestock, but also fertilizing the soil. So this has been very popular among the communities. So now everyone wants to have a bomber because they see the impact. Like everyone that got a bomber has not lost any livestock for the past 4 years. And they also get to fertilize their crop fields. So now they are in demand. So another method that we use, which is also fairly new, is the lion lights or the flashing lights. So this is something that was developed by Richard Turere, who is a Maasai young man. He was a boy, but now he's a man. So we get these from him. So they are just solar powered, and they just flash during the night, and that flash would mimic like somebody going around with a torch. So the lions and even the hyenas as well, when they come and see that flash, then they go back or run away because they would think that there's somebody who's walking around. So this is something that has also been very effective in protecting livestock against predation by lions and hyenas. So we have distributed this to some community members, and they are seeing the impact. Then we also look at like some of the not so expensive methods. So we also want to look at traditional methods that the communities have been doing to protect their livestock over the years. And so one of the methods is raising their crows from the ground so that it's at least 1.5 meters or above the ground. So this method was being used by the Tonga people who live in Binga, in the area we are working with. But they use this for their huts, like where they would stay. So they would build these structures and they would stay inside above the ground. So we just took that concept and then developed it so that we can use it for these small stock, because hyenas usually can dig or they can climb across. So we wanted to get something that would be elevated so that the hyenas won't reach the livestock. So this is what we also used as a method for protecting small stock, and it has been very effective. So this ladder is movable. So once the livestock are inside, then you can remove the ladder, and then hyenas or lions won't have access to the livestock. So this is a fairly cheaper method for protecting your livestock, because you only need this fence and then the roof, but the other materials you get from local. And then we also, for elephant conflict, one of the methods we are using is using the chili. So the chili pepper, yes. So we crush the chili, and then we mix with oil, used oil. So this is the used oil, and then you can mix with the dung, cattle dung or elephant dung, and then you make these molds which you dry, and then when you burn, that smoke irritates the elephants, and then they rush back into the protected area. You can also use a string, so immerse the string in the mixture of the crushed chilies and the used oil, and then put the string around the crop fields as a fence, which also prevents the elephants from approaching the field. So it's one of the methods that has also been working, not only for elephants, but for other herbivores as well. So the mobile boma that I was talking about, so this is Mr. January Nebiri. So he's one of the beneficiaries of the mobile boma. So you can listen to him as he narrates the story of how this mobile boma has helped him and in protecting his livestock.
January Nebiri Ward 7, Nyamyamba, Rural District Council, under Chief Nebiri. Ndiri beneficiary we mabomas adakapirwa ne WCA. Mabomas aya chinhu chakanaka. Pazvakatanga kuuya tichinzoona nyaya dzemabhoma, vamwe taitaura nemutauriro akangosiyana siyana. vamwe vachizonza zvinokonesa mombe dzenyu muzvinhingirika hazvishandi zvakazodai kana kuti mukasanganisa matanga dzimwe mombe dzinozodai tichongonzwawo saka neresistance iyo ndo yandaingonzwawo ndichingotara ndakangoshandisa izvozvo ndingoti maybe ndo zviripo kuzosvika ndazoona ndikazoti kana taita zvimaworkshop tichionesana ndichiona disadvantage yandiri nenzvimbo yandiri ndiri about 5 kilometers even less than 5 kilometers kubva pandiri paboundary pavege paboundary chaipo chaipo ndopane musha wangu saka ndakaona kuti ndiri kurasikirwa nezvifuwo mbudzi ndine mbudzi dzasvika kuma65 iko zvinobva vasara mbudzi 8 mombe zvichiramba zvimwe chete nhande mombe dzakati wandei dzimwe dzacho dzechingorumwa kuzosvika ndazoti no pandakanzwa chirongwa chemabhomas apa ndobva dzazoti WCA vakati no vandibiri ndobva vandoonawo vakati no takupa ichi bhoma iri chokwadi ndakaripira bhoma rangu iri muna October just a week ndangopiwa bhoma rangu ndakabva ndaona kuti Mwari vane zvavanenge vangoitawo kuti zvinhu zviite shumba dzakauya padanga rangu apa rakadzakauya padanga rangu dzikatenderera ndikaita head count 13 shumba dzakauya dzichitenderera danga rangu usiku iwowo tangobva vhiki ndapiwa bhoma saka ndinoti inini kuvarimi vese vanoda kurima mombe munyami chirongwa chemabhomas ichi chirongwa chakanaka uye zvinochengeta zvifuwo zvako mune zvakanaka hakuna shumba hadzipinde mudanga iri asi shumba hayatake chinhu chaisingaoni saka nemashoko iwayo ndofunga ndo pandaperera ini ndiri kufara chaizvo chaizvo ndiri kuti dai vamwe varimiwo vabatsirwawo nemabhoma iwayo kuitira kuti tese tichengetedze zvifuwo zvedu uye zviti varimi vari successful munzvimbo dzedu.
So I think Lily asked me about like what helps me to keep going, and I told her that this is what keeps me going, the impact of our work. When somebody's life is being changed because of the work that we are doing, that's what keeps me going. That's what helps me to wake up each day and try again, even when we face challenges. Like you saw that this was being funded by USAID. So I was talking about human-wildlife conflict mitigation. So we also have this goal, which is around promoting livelihoods that are resilient to the impacts of climate change and the impacts of human-wildlife conflict, but are compatible with wildlife conservation. So we realized that our focus at first, when we started, was around human-wildlife conflict mitigation. But then we realized that the communities we work with, they do appreciate that. They do appreciate the reduction in the losses, but they also have to put food on their table. They needed other ways of putting food on their table in the environment that they are living in, where they are experiencing constant droughts. And in Zimbabwe, we had like one of our worst droughts last year. Livestock died, wildlife died, and even people were dying because of the drought. So the impacts of climate change are real for these communities. So we needed to look at ways to diversify their income so that they can be cushioned against the impacts of climate change, so that they can bring income to their families, so that they can put food on the table. So that's why we started developing this goal and looking at various ways we can help the communities to earn an income and to adapt to these challenges that they were facing. So one of the ways we are doing it is through the chili that I talked about. So chili is a crop that they can grow. They can use some of the chilies to protect their crop fields. As I mentioned, crushing the chili. And then they can also sell this chili to the local market, to the international market, like food chains, like Nando's or other industries where they use the chilies. So it's also not going to be destroyed by elephants, because they won't like the chili. So we were looking at a crop which they can depend on, which can help them with human-wildlife conflict, but also bring an income, and also being resilient to the impacts of climate change. So this is something that we are starting now. We want the communities to have their chili plots, and then they can have an income from these chili. The other project that we are looking at is the sustainable beekeeping, where they are keeping beehives and harvesting honey from the beehives. And this also is a way to cushion them against the impacts of climate change and human-wildlife conflict, and diversifying the income so that they don't also depend on natural resources for their livelihoods. So we have, this is Gregory Siamulema. So he's one of the beneficiaries of our beehives. So he received one beehive, and after about 4 weeks, his beehive was colonized. And when he saw that it was colonized, he started building another beehive by himself. So he wanted to increase the beehives he has so that he can get more honey. So he has 3 kids who are going to school. So now he's really excited about the potential of getting honey and selling that honey and getting money to pay for his kids' school fees. So he's one of the recipients who's really looking forward to growing and building more beehives so that he can gain an income from that. So we have more communities that are now wanting to have beehives, and it's a source of nutrition as well when they get the honey, but they can value add and sell the honey and gain an income. And then we are also looking at restoring the habitats that are around these communities, because most of the grazing areas are now poor because of the increase in the pressure on grazing areas, with more people coming into these areas, and also the increase in human population. There's increased demand and increased pressure on the resources that are available. So we are working with these communities in restoring the grazing areas, and also improving the health and productivity of the grazing areas and also of the livestock, so that they can get better livestock quality, they can get better money for their livestock. And then in the long run, we also want to end up doing certification for the beef, so that it is wildlife friendly, so that they can get more value on the market for their beef. So this would also improve their livelihoods and also help them to appreciate the presence of wildlife in their areas, and improve the tolerance to the impacts of human-wildlife conflict. Then we also have our research and conservation leadership, where we do all the research, and we also looking at building the capacity of the next generation of conservation leaders. So we do GPS collaring that I talked about. We have camera trapping, where we look at distribution of wildlife. We monitor diets, we monitor the wildlife that we have. So this was during a collaring of an elephant. So we can see the movement patterns. We can identify the corridors that the animal is using, and then protect those corridors, because most of the corridors now have humans that are settling in those corridors. So we need to protect that. And then we also have our leadership program, which is focused on skills training and also increasing the number of women in conservation, which is something that, yeah, I'm really passionate about. So we have a camp that we have established in one of the national parks in Zimbabwe, called Chizarira National Park. And yeah, it's one of the most beautiful national parks in Zimbabwe. It's small, but yeah, the landscape is really beautiful. So we have these tents that have 2 beds in them, and we have a capacity to have 40 people at the camp. So this is where our research and the conservation leadership will be happening. And some of the programs that we want to do is to bring students to the camp so that they can get the field training and they can get the skills and build the capacity so that they can, when they finish school, they can be able to go out and get employment and use those skills. And then with the GPS scholars, we are also looking at the movement patterns and the geofencing that I talked about, which helps to track the location and the movement and warn the community so that they can be able to protect themselves and prevent the conflict from happening. Then we have this Conservation Sisters program that I'm really excited about this and looking forward to implementing it this year. So with the Conservation Sisters program, we realized that there are very few women in conservation, especially in Zimbabwe and in the continent. We find very few women in conservation. And it's because of the barriers that they experience, like along the way. So from when they start their universities to when they graduate and look for employment, there are so many barriers. And so we want to address the challenges that they face at each stage from the first year when they go to university to start for their conservation degree. We have the mentorship. We have the mentorship in their final year and then the fellowship where we help them to get experience for a year at an institution or an organization, and we provide them with support during that year so that they can get the experience to be able to be employable. So we are really excited about this, and we hope that this will help us get more women into conservation. Because even when you look at our team, we have a good number of women, but we can do better. And because my organization is women-founded, women-led, I want to have more women in my team. Thank you. And then, yeah, the environmental education program, so that I mentioned. So this is something that I am really passionate about. And from my own experience of not having gotten this opportunity, I don't want everyone else that is coming after me to experience the same thing. We want to give opportunities to these kids to experience nature from a young age, especially the kids that are living around wildlife areas. Like the only time that they get to see wildlife is when a conflict happens, when the elephants come in and start to destroy their crops. That's when they get to see wildlife. So they have a negative experience with wildlife. So we want them to have a positive experience where they get into the national park and see wildlife in its natural habitat. So this is something that we are working with schools, and we have conservation clubs in schools, and we support these clubs with lessons, with activities, including visit to national parks. And then in the communities, we are also bringing awareness, exchanging knowledge with the communities on ways that they can better coexist with wildlife. So the information, like the behavior of wildlife, how they can interact with wildlife in situations where they find themselves face to face with the wildlife. So we provide that information to the community so that they can better coexist with wildlife. And then we have various ways of promoting coexistence. So we have the awareness campaigns that we do, and we also have collaborated with Wild Africa and also with the Elephant Fund to look at this, the chatbot, which is it's a WhatsApp messaging platform where people can get information about wildlife, behavior, about conflict, how they can act when they are experiencing conflict. So it's something that we have also distributed in the communities to raise awareness. And so we have already started to see a behavior shift in these kids. Some of them are now starting to take initiatives. Some of them are starting to plant trees. And there was this school that found that the road that they used to go to school had some gullies because it had rained a lot. So the gullies were now starting to form on the roads. So they came together and started to fill the gullies with these rocks to close the gullies and stop the road from becoming bad. So it's such initiatives, like they are born out of the realization that they need to protect their environment. And so it's an impact that we really appreciate when we see these kids taking the initiative by themselves to act. So these kids are also, so in Zimbabwe, the last Friday of every month, we have a cleanup campaign where people just clean around their environment. And these kids are now every last Friday of the month, they go out around their school and start picking litter and cleaning up. And it's something that they just do without being supervised. So it's also really good to see that they are taking those lessons and practicing them. So we had a conversation, was it this afternoon, around how it is important for the kids to get that exposure, to learn from a young age about how they can care for their environment, for their wildlife, so that even if they end up becoming a politician or an accountant or whatever, they still have those values and they can take them and help contribute to the protection of our environment and of our biodiversity. So it's really important for us to touch these kids and involve them from the young age. So that's why I was really happy to see all the kids running around in the zoo and really appreciating the wildlife. So this is like some of our impact that we have seen over the past 4 years. So the conflict has been one of the reasons why the organization was formed, because we wanted to address this conflict, which is becoming one of the largest threats facing wildlife in Zimbabwe and across the African continent. So we have managed to reduce the conflict by 7.5% in the past 4 years. Yeah, so this is because of the work that the community guardians are doing on the ground, the support we are getting from the various stakeholders, and the collaborations that we are experiencing, and also the support from our donors and from everyone that is helping us. So it needs all of us to come together for us to start seeing the results on the ground and to start seeing the coexistence happening. Like, we won't get to a point where maybe we won't have any conflicts at all, but we can decrease them to a tolerable level where the communities can accept the cost that they are experiencing, because they are now reduced. So we want to get to that level, and having this percentage of reduction is a positive step towards getting to that point. And we are already seeing, even in the behavior and the attitudes the communities have towards wildlife, it has shifted tremendously, because they see that their losses have now decreased. And we also have more households that are taking up these conflict mitigation measures, implementing them. Sometimes you have communities that just see somebody else doing something, their neighbor who has built like a raised crow, and then they copy that and do it themselves. So it's like spreading around this positive behavior around coexistence is spreading from one household to another. And that's what we want to see, because the more people who adopt, then the more impact we have. And also the land that is being protected is increasing, because we are in these landscapes where people and wildlife are living together. So we want to protect these species, these key species like lions and elephants, because when we protect those, then we are protect everything else that is around those areas. And our community guardians are like our backbone, and they do a lot of work, and they cover a huge distances, and they provide the information the community needs. They are always there for the community, and this is also having a huge impact on the conflict. And then the kids in the schools, we have more than 80 schools that are in our program, and we are supporting them with education material. And I was just talking to Lily that we need support around that, sharing that information, the material that we have at the zoo. I've seen like various material, and I think the school kids would love that. So thank you.
Wonderful. We're going to welcome questions. I'm going to run around with the mic so that our friends who are watching on Zoom and the recording can hear the questions. So raise your hand and I'll come to you with questions for the mic.
I understand that HWC educates and promotes proven mitigation methods, but I wonder what organizations develop and test the effectiveness of the methods that you use. In other words, where do you get your ideas?
Thank you for that. Yeah, so there are some methods that the communities have been using, traditional methods, because they have been living with wildlife for many generations. So there are some traditional methods that they were using. So we use those as well. We look at those and look at how we can improve them. So one of the reasons why they end up losing livestock is their crows, the structures where they keep their livestock are weak. So it's a traditional method that they have been using, but they are weak. So we help them strengthen those. And when they do, then it stops the lions from getting access. So that's one way of doing it, like looking at the traditional ecological knowledge and using that and strengthening that. And then the second way is looking at like the new methods that are coming in, the technology, things that are being developed, like the mobile bombers. And we test, so we have to test every method, every new method that comes, because sometimes it's not applicable to all the areas. So it might work in Zimbabwe, but it might not work in Tanzania. It might work somewhere else and it might not work. Even in the same country, it might work in one region, but not the other. So even with the mobile bombers, some communities don't want them because they don't want to mix their cattle. So you have now to find how you can maybe implement that, but in a different way, because you can have like different families coming together and putting their livestock in one bomber. So it's something that we encountered as well, because people didn't want, and I think you heard him say like they didn't want the bombers because they thought like they would mix their livestock. So we ended up saying, okay, we can still have a bomber at an individual household level so that each household can have their cattle separately and they don't have to mix. So looking at things like that, like the culture, and looking at how you can approach it in a sensitive manner so that you don't undermine their cultural values. So it's various things. So we also have the beehive fences that are being used for elephant conflict mitigation, and they have worked like in Kenya. But in some areas, they are not working. And it's because they are not effective, but it's because you need the beehives to be colonized. So if you just put them in an area where there's no food for the bees or water, then it's not going to work. So you have to look at those various factors when you are doing the tests.
I saw where the guardians, they chase the elephants away. How do they chase elephants?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so when we recruit the community guardians, they also get training on how they should interact with wildlife and how they can safely chase lions, chase elephants away. So they don't do it only themselves, so they also need support from the communities. So when an elephant is like approaching, then they rally the community so that they can make noise and hit drums and make noise to chase the elephant away. So they always get support from their communities. And that was why it was important for us to have people from these communities leading the conservation efforts, because people respect them. They are their children, they are their relatives, they live with them. So when they say, let's come together, let's do this, the community listens, and then they get the results.
I just want to say, I think it's really inspirational, all the work that you're doing to help out young women in conservation. And I was just curious, you know, you're so well accomplished, going to Oxford, getting your PhD, starting this organization, and going through everything that you've been through. What are some of the biggest barriers that you've had to face and how you've gotten through them to be where you are at this point, and also getting the organization to the point where it is now?
Thank you. Yeah, there are many, many barriers. And I think one of the barriers is even like culture, like for African culture. Like there are roles or like jobs that are expected of women, and then there are some jobs that like people will be like, not for a woman. So because conservation, like you often have to be in the field, you often have to travel, and sometimes because you have like family responsibilities, then that would limit your capability of performing your job. So those things would end up forcing most girls not to get into conservation because it becomes a challenge for them to do the job and also take the responsibility at home. And then the other barrier is just where because it's seen as a men's job, and it's also male dominated. Like even in Zimbabwe, it's male dominated. So when you are a female in the field, like people will be just looking at you and just even when you have a PhD, like they will just be doubting your capability. So you have like you might be the only woman in the room filled with males. So even just having your voice heard becomes a challenge. So that's why we need more women to be in the room so that we can support each other.
You know, I have a house cat that when it wants to get to some place, it'll keep on trying. And I'm wondering, with the bomas, is it impenetrable, or do you find that it becomes a barrier, one barrier to allow them to address, you know, a frequent visitor?
Yes, so the material, because it's opaque, so the lions won't be able to see what is inside. So they can smell the cat or they can hear, but they can't see. So because they can't see, they won't be, they won't have like an instinct to attack because they don't see the livestock inside. So this is preventing the lions from attacking. So what we find is they would come to the boma, they would walk around and they can smell, they can see. And because they can't attack, then they move to the next place. And usually if the next homestead is a place where the livestock are outside, the crow or it's weak, then it attacks there. So now the community is also understanding this because they have seen it and they have seen how the mobile bombers are working. So they are now trying to either get the mobile bomber or build strong crows so that when the lion passes through this crow where there's a bomber, then they won't be, their cattle won't be attacked. So far, like in the past 5 years, we haven't seen any lion like attempting to attack. But we were talking about it this afternoon, that maybe if one just decides to say, okay, let me just, crawl, put my claws on this and it might tear. So it's something that we are also monitoring to see if there's any shift in behavior with the lions, whether they will start to try and experiment with the boma.
We have another question from our friend Mahi, who's watching online. You mentioned, Moreangels, that the GPS collars act as an early warning system and help drive the animals back into the national park. But does this prevent animals like elephants and lions from moving or migrating across large landscapes and instead force them to stay inside the national parks?
No, so they keep coming back, and sometimes so we also use this data to map like the wildlife corridors. So we end up seeing the areas where they frequent or they use to move from one place to another. I didn't show the map, but we have a map that shows like some of these wildlife corridors around the areas that we are working in. So we know like which areas they are moving. And what we are trying to do is even focusing our mitigation measures or our human wildlife conflict work in those areas that the elephants, the lions are using, so that the communities, they can tolerate them. And that would allow the animals to move through. So we want these corridors to be permeable for the wildlife species, because if the communities don't tolerate, then it means those animals won't be able to move, and then we have challenges with genetic diversity and all those challenges, because the habitat is now fragmented, there's no connectivity. Yeah.
Thank you so much. What you have shared with us is so impressive, and we're so honored to have you here. Could you make a comment about what the prey species are like for these animals? Is there enough food for them to eat in the wild that will complement who they are as opposed to eating livestock?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the threats as well, so I mentioned that human wildlife conflict is one of the threats that is affecting wildlife, but one of the threats that is affecting the large carnivores is the prey abundance. So because of things like poaching, for example, for subsistence poaching, where like the community can snare wildlife species, the herbivores, then that's depleting the population of herbivores. But also the encroachment of communities into wildlife areas where they are seeking land for agriculture, then that would also limit the available land for the wildlife species, and it would also lead to depletion of the herbivores. So because of that, then we have reduced food for the carnivores. And last year, because of the drought, that got even worse because now some of the herbivores were dying. So the conflict started to increase as well. So because the lions can't find food inside the protected areas, they end up going out. And when they go out, they find easier food, because now if the livestock is not being herded, or if it's not being protected well, then it becomes easy prey for these lions. So they end up like just coming back to get easy prey. So that's why we want to make it very difficult for them to have access to these livestock, so that they can they are forced to go back and look for prey inside their protected areas.
So when it comes to sharing conservation education with children in the community, do you notice that they kind of bring their families and their parents along with that? Or do you have to approach adults separately and like teach them in a different way than the children?
Yeah, so we have different programs for the school kids and the communities, but we also have like sports. So we are also creating programs where we can have both the kids and the adults in one place. So sport is one of the things that brings everyone together. So we recently had a sporting tournament and the adults were there, the kids were there, and we talked about coexistence in that space. So yeah, those are some of the things that we want to explore around how we can bring everyone together so that we can have those conversations. Yeah, so I think it's also something that the zoo can help us with, to brainstorm around ideas of how we can do that. Yeah, because I think that can also have a huge impact. And because kids like they talk about things that they do at school. So even with the environmental clubs, the conservation clubs, we see that when they go home, the kids will start to tell their parents like what they should not do or what they should do. So there was this parent who said, like, now I can't even throw paper or rubbish around because my kid always says, don't do that. You should not do that. We're told at school that you can't throw rubbish around. So
Hi, I grew up in a ranching community in Argentina, and it's very impoverished. I have grown up to fear and dislike our version of lions, the pumas. We associate them with the loss of our horses and our cattle. And I'm really inspired by how you talked about shifting that perspective for children. So I'm curious, what was the most effective way of shifting their narrative?
yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think so when they experience, so we had our first field trip like 2 years ago for the kids. So when they experience now wildlife in a positive way, when they go into their wildlife habitat and see the elephants like just going about their business and not attacking their crops, they get to see a different side of the elephants. And that also shifts their mindset to say, okay, elephants can just like, roam around and just behave like nicely. So that really helps them to see that, okay, there is another way that elephants behave besides the way that they are used to. So that gives them an appreciation of the elephants. And they start to, because also they are now learning more about the behavior of the elephant. They are now learning more about how they can avoid being attacked by the elephant, or what they should do if they end up encountering an elephant. So because now they also have this knowledge, and they become more confident of how they can approach the problem when they encounter it. So that also shifts like their attitudes towards the elephants.
Okay, we have 2 more questions.
First of all, thank you for all you are doing. It's fabulous. But I noticed on your map that there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of green space. And with the amount of climate change that is coming, are the countries working with you at all on not farming, trying to, because I think from what I know, a lot of the tilling of the land and farming is also adding to, almost like desert habitat. And they're worried about how much that'll come back. I know you got enough to do, but have you heard anything from your governments on how they're going to support you?
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, so the areas we work in are across transfrontier conservation areas. So they have like several countries that have come together and agreed to say we are going to work together to protect this certain like landscape. So that is one way of like helping us to start moving forward. but there's also need to like continuously engage and advocate with the government so that the policies can align to the conservation needs that are on the ground. So with the encroachment, it's a huge issue. It's a huge problem because there is increased demand for land. People need land to build their homes and also to till the land and get food. So some of the ways we are trying to solve that is to involve the leadership, the local leadership, the chiefs, because they have the power to give people land or to take the land away or to stop people from moving to these areas. So some of the chiefs, so one of the chiefs that we have worked with the longest, he's doing amazing work in ensuring that the communities don't end up getting into a wildlife area. So he even tells us that if somebody goes and starts, putting up their field in a wildlife area or close to a wildlife area, don't help them. You should just leave them. We are not going to help anyone who does that. So that the chief is like leading the way in ensuring that his community complies with that. Even when we told him that one of the problems we have is that people are not putting their livestock in the crows at night. They are not protecting their livestock. So because the livestock is just roaming around during the night, lions would easily like kill the livestock. So he then said, now I'm enacting a bylaw that says if your cattle are found outside the crow during the night, you have to pay the chief. So yeah, so that would prevent people from doing the negative behavior. So it's really important for us to get that support from the leadership at the local level, at the country level. So we also work very closely with our government. And we help support all their programs. We also help with the consultations. When they do consultations, we are there to provide them with the information, with the data, so that they can make decisions based on the data on the ground.
Thank you again for spending this time with us. I think we all learned so much. I know that you're currently based in Zimbabwe and then a bit in Zambia and Mozambique. Do you have any plans to expand your organization to work in other countries and areas of Africa that could use conservation mitigation help?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think what we have always wanted to do, like even when we started, was we want everything to be very organic. So we wanted even our growth to be very organic. We didn't want to rush anything. And so we would love to expand into other areas, but we want to do it organically to have it just happen naturally without us like saying, okay, let's do this. So, but now what we are doing is we are collaborating with people in other countries that are working on the same issues that we are working on, or that need like our expertise in helping them address the human-wildlife conflict problems. So at least for now, that's what we are doing. But if it comes, then we'll be happy to expand.
Thank you, Moreangels. But don't leave. One more question. Your program is just great. And I know you said that Wildlife Conservation Action's been around for half a dozen years. So just a question about hope. If you imagine 50 years from now in Zimbabwe where you work, what gives you hope and what do you think it'll be like for the people and the landscape 50 years from now?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, what gives me hope is the people. Because as Zimbabweans, as Africans, it's part of our culture, it's part of our heritage. The wildlife is part of who we are. So there's hope because it's something that we want to protect. We want our kids, our grandchildren, great-grandchildren to be able to see the wildlife. We don't want to fail. So even these past few years that we have been working with the communities, we see that, we hear that, they tell us that they want the wildlife to be protected. But what they don't want is the cost that comes with protecting wildlife. So there is hope that if we can deal with these costs, if we can provide the support that the communities need, then we can restore our wildlife and we can have in 50 years more wildlife than that we have today.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Moreangels Mbizah. You can learn more about her organization and partner with the zoo to support her with ease. If you can't remember them, take a picture of it. But this was a wonderful program and very inspiring.